Today we're back in the shop for part 3 of our Ram 2500 build series. In part 1, we covered our initial suspension upgrade, as well as some lighting enhancements, wheels and tire packages, and a few other topics. In part 2, we upgraded the suspension to Thuren's Predator kit, which is a new 4-link in the rear and 3-inch King bypass shocks all the way around. Today for part 3, we're going to cover a number of performance and reliability upgrades that we've done to the truck. As most folks watching this video already know, the Ram 2500 and some 3500s come with a 68 RFE from the factory. This modern day equivalent of a transmission that's been around since 1999 has a lower first gear and 2 overdrives when compared to the previous versions. This transmission is great if you're running stock tire size and no performance upgrades. But once you step up to 37-inch tires and start running some performance upgrades, it has a reputation for not being as stout as the rest of the truck. With our build here, running 37-inch tires and running performance upgrades, the transmission proved to not be as strong as it needed to be for the way we use our truck. So last fall, we actually experienced slipping in the transmission while we were going up a hill in 5th gear. We quickly got off the freeway and tried to save the clutch pack, but it had been glazed and our transmission was smoked. So we looked at options. What should we do to upgrade the transmission? When we started looking for options to upgrade our transmission, we settled on Suncoast. The Suncoast Category 2 is good for up to 500 horsepower. It has a billet input shaft, this deep transmission pan, and then we upgraded our torque converter to the billet torque converter at the same time we were replacing the transmission. Couple of notes for the DIY crowd out there. Make sure you follow the flush, fill, and break-in instructions to the T. I'll also add that there's a quick learn process that you do have to run through when you first install the transmission, so the computer knows what gear it's in, and the truck will shift better after a few weeks. At initial install, for those first few test drives, we had some shifting issues, but the computer learned and shifted better after about 2 weeks. One more word of caution for folks upgrading to a transmission like this with a billet torque converter. These upgraded torque converters remove some of the dampening that you have in an OEM torque converter. So when it locks up, especially at low speed in 3rd gear, when it locks up or unlocks, you feel a little jar, and that's just from a more forceful lockup than you're used to in your OEM torque converter. So once we upgraded the transmission in this truck, we wanted to start tackling performance upgrades. The first place we went is to run a horsepower tune. We worked with Calibrated Power and got a set of files built for our Suncoast transmission. Now those files get uploaded to the truck through an EasyLink Auto Agent 2. So it's this sort of standard flash process where this end plugs into the OBD2. In these modern trucks, we also have to run the unlock cable, which you install on this terminal block below the dash, and then plug into the auto agent. Then you simply bring up an app on your phone and you choose from one of 6 files that are available. Here we can run anything from max performance, so that near 500 horsepower tune, 1100 foot-pounds of torque, all the way down to valet mode, which is like a 30 mile per hour max. And then there's a series of tunes between, including different towing capacities. We've been super happy with this tune. We've done it for a customer of ours who says his truck really rips, and we agree. It's been a great, great upgrade. In addition to just being able to flash horsepower tunes onto the truck, this device and its accompanying app also allows you to change some of the functionality of your truck through the programming. So for example, if we're running a 52-gallon tank in the truck, we can tell the computer that we have 52 gallons and the distance to empty will actually update on the truck. We can tell the truck it's got 37-inch tires and it corrects the speedo. If we were to re-gear the truck, we could say, hey, we're going from 373s to 410s or whatever the re-gear is. We can put that into the app and it'll flash it onto the truck. Lastly, you can read trouble codes. So there's other ways to do that, but if you've got an easy link and you throw a check engine light or you've got some sort of code that appears, you plug in your auto agent device, you pull up your app, you can clear the code, you can read the code. It'll tell you if it's active or just stored. It's a great sort of capability of this device. So we've been super happy with both the performance of the truck and sort of the functionality of this device. One more thing about the auto agent. So these horsepower tunes and the device itself is 50 state legal and CARB approved. So if you're a California resident or in a state that sets some regulation on what you can tune on your vehicle, make sure you're buying the right one for your location. There are tunes that are not 50 state legal. And then when we go through the upgrades to the motor, all of our upgrades are emissions intact, 50 state legal, CARB approved. So Banks has taken the time, they're located in Southern California, Banks has taken the time to make sure that all of their products, just like this tune, are 50 state legal, CARB approved, all emissions equipment stays in place. Next, let's talk about the intake side of the motor upgrades. And we'll sort of follow the path of the intake air as it reaches the motor. The first place is the Banks Ram Air cold air intake. This cold air intake is capable of 900 CFM, so there's 50% more cubic feet per minute available going to the turbo. We're running a cleanable oiled filter. It's also available with a paper replacement filter. So as the air leaves this higher capacity cold air intake, it goes to the turbo. Now the turbo's job is to compress that air. The downside to compressed air is it's hotter. So the next thing the motor has to do is cool that air down so that colder, higher density air goes into the motor. So it does that by taking this compressed air from the boost tube to the intercooler. We've upgraded the boost tubes. So first is the hot side to a 3.5-inch mandrel bent smooth Banks boost tube. That air travels to the intercooler, runs across the intercooler, lowers the temperature, increases the density, and then it's got to go from what we call the cold side of the intercooler up into the intake. That cold side boost tube in the factory truck is plastic. So we've increased the size to 3.5-inch mandrel bent steel on both sides with these smooth boost tubes that increase the diameter that the air travels through by 68% on its way to the intake. So as the air comes off the intercooler and through that cold side boost tube, it goes through probably the most impactful upgrade on this intake side of the motor. And that's the Banks Monster Ram intake elbow. So the elbow does two things for us. One, it significantly increases the volume of air going into the motor, and it reduces a potential failure point in these motors. First, let's talk about the increase in the volume of air. Banks used computational fluid dynamics to design an intake elbow that takes the 38 pounds per minute that your stock elbow makes available to the motor to 72 pounds. And they do that through a couple ways. One is most of their competitors work around the existing fuel line to cylinder one and sort of find their way to the intake. Banks provides a new fuel rail or fuel line that's out of the way of the elbow and allows them to optimize the direction that the air goes into the motor. The other thing they do is eliminate the grid heater. When you pull off an OEM intake elbow, you'll notice that the grid heater just about chokes the intake. Banks eliminates that and provides a much larger opening into the intake and replaces the functionality of the grid heater with a single element heater in the top of their elbow. The other thing, in addition to increased airflow to the motor, that does is it eliminates a failure point. The grid heater is held on by a stud and a nut, and that nut has been known to come loose and fall into the motor and roll back to cylinder 6 and essentially ruin your motor at startup. So by eliminating the grid heater, we've got increased air volume going into the motor, and we've reduced or eliminated a failure point. Before we leave the engine bay and all these intake side upgrades, I want to mention one more. Banks sells a MAP relocation kit. It's a little billet bracket that moves the manifold absolute pressure sensor just out of the intake stream. They promote this product so that sensor moves out of what can be a dirty intake stream. When your EGR sends exhaust gas back into your intake, that sensor can get fouled up pretty quickly. We also know that some trucks will throw a MAP sensor error code, and we've had no codes on this truck since moving that MAP sensor into the relocation bracket. The next step in our build was to pair all those intake side upgrades with an exhaust side one. So we opted for the Banks 5-inch DPF back exhaust system. When we first started looking at this upgrade, I was a little concerned about the noise. I've heard those deleted trucks or trucks with a full exhaust system that are just a little bit too loud. I've also heard those truck owners complain about a drone or harmonic sound that you get at highway speed. This exhaust, it does reduce back pressure almost 10%, and it is a little throatier, but it sounds great. And when coupled with all those intake side performance upgrades, has been a really nice add to this build. For the next upgrade, let's move to the rear of the truck, literally. We see these Banks rear differential covers pretty regularly in the shop, but until you pull one out of the box and really look at the engineering that's gone into it, it's not quite as impressive. There's a few things that Banks has done to make this differential cover sort of stand out from the pack. The first is that it's got this sort of ear on the bottom that captures the air coming under the truck and redirects it back onto the cover to improve cooling. Inside, on the back side of this cover, it also has a fin system that's engineered to direct the oil coming off of that ring gear back onto the gear. Some of these other covers that other manufacturers make, they actually increase oil capacity and they're flat backed, and they actually increase gear oil temperature. This cover reduces gear oil temperature by 60 degrees. While we're at the rear of the truck, I want to check in on our suspension system. In this ever-evolving, sort of always improving suspension upgrade with our 2500 build project, we've been looking at ways to eliminate running airbags. This truck runs a sled deck and snowmobile in the winter, and that's a little more than 800 pounds. Our 1-inch lift, soft rate Thuren coils can't handle that kind of constant load, so you need an airbag. So we looked at, are there products on the market that we could run in the winter at least and eliminate airbags? This Carli R2, so dual rate coil, is great for a constant load. So if you've got 800-900 pounds in the bed, this dual rate coil, which has a soft rate at the top and then the stiffer rate on the bottom, is great. It worked well for us all winter. But when we get to an empty bed and we run no weight in the truck and we're not towing, it's just too stiff. It's just uncomfortable to drive. So we've opted to go back to Thuren for their dual rate coil. This coil was designed specifically for the Predator kit we're running and has worked great with no load on the truck. An empty bed, you get all kinds of suspension travel and in a ride that you can actually use on a daily commute. The next product we want to cover is the IDash Pro by Banks. This whole concept of being able to monitor more than what you can see from your dashboard really came from the Sprinter side of our business, where we were seeing issues where if we turned off our Sprinter in the middle of a regen, it would trigger codes or go into limp mode or just have issues. And the DPF wouldn't clear, and we'd have to force a regen. So we started looking at products across the board where you can monitor regen status. So here we can see that our regen status is off. And then there's a host, there's 8 options on this screen of different data that we can choose from. And the data is sort of endless across all systems in your truck. This IDash Pro allows us to monitor up to 40 different things at once, and we can scroll through the various screens. We can also record data, and we can set limits. So if we wanted to set a limit on transmission temperature or what have you, we can set that limit on the IDash, and it'll actually go red, or however we select the setup to alert us, that tells us the transmission's gotten to a temperature at which you've set a limit. We can do that with just about all of these parameters. The other thing we can do is read engine codes and clear those. And then we can set up the display to match our truck or our preference. So the Ram is this sort of blue tone for all of our display. So we've opted for this blue and black to match in the Banks IDash. We've been super happy with this product and this little 2-inch package. It's not super invasive. It's not mounted on the windshield like you see with other products. It's been really good to sort of know what our truck's doing beyond the few things that the dashboard tells us. That wraps up part 3 of our Ram 2500 build series. If you're interested to see what happens next with this truck, follow us on YouTube at Sierra Adventure Vehicles. Check us out at sierraadventurevehicles.com or email us at info@sierraadventurevehicles.com. If you have a question about your truck or are ready to take your rig to the next level, reach out to us and we'll make your dream a reality.